Welcome to the Bill Walton Show, featuring conversations with leaders, entrepreneurs, artists, and thinkers. Fresh perspectives on money, culture, politics, and human flourishing. Interesting people, interesting things.
Welcome to the Bill Walton Show. I'm Bill Walton. Well, for all you conservatives out there who are longing for interesting films, documentary, or feature, we're featuring something on our show, which is a little different from our usual fare. We're showcasing Palladium Pictures Incubator. They've done 4 productions of short documentaries, and are all, I recommend, and terrific. And they're going to be airing it on Rear Clear Politics quite soon. And today, though, for this episode, we've got Greg De Deugd. Sorry, Greg.
Yeah.
If you all could see the way this is written, you'd never pronounce it either. It's Dutch and it's impossible. And Thomas Pack with a much easier to pronounce name. And Thomas is the director of the incubator program for Palladium Pictures, and Greg has directed a film called The Secret Game: Fast Break to Freedom.
Yes. Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me on your show, and thanks to Thomas and Michael and Palladium for helping us put together the film. The film I made, Fast Break to Freedom, The Secret Game, is the story of what was the first interracial basketball game, and it took place in North Carolina in the 40s. This was like during World War II, where there was, Jim Crow was the law of the land, and there was no, race mixing going on. Nobody was allowed to play sports with each other, and we have what became our main character of the story was John McClendon, who was a famous basketball coach who learned actually basketball from Jim Naismith, the inventor of the game. And McClendon's first job, after school, after he became an expert at the game of basketball, was coaching at North Carolina Central, what would become North Carolina Central University. At the time, it was North Carolina College for Negroes in Durham. And what he learned from Jim Naismith at the time was this way of playing basketball, which was sort of revolutionary, and it sort of hinged on what we know as the fast break today. And that wasn't always the way that basketball was even played. It was played originally a lot slower game. And one of his innovations was this fast break style of basketball. And he trained up his team in Durham to be just experts at this new style of play. Like, they just got the ball across the court faster than the other team could get there. And they were racking up the scoreboard. I mean, they were winning by like 80, 90 points a game.
This was the Carolina for Negroes.
North Carolina College for Negroes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So in the CIAA, which was the Negro Basketball League at the time, they were just dominant, and they couldn't find anybody they could beat. They even had a team, I think it was Shaw or St. Augustine at the time, who, in order to try to stop them from being able to be effective at the fast break basketball, had their gym floor waxed the day before they were going to come play them, so they were slipping all over the place. And
that'll do it.
Yeah, but their coach even was like, don't worry about it, just take off your shoes. And they were going to play in their socks, so they didn't, slip all over the place. And the other coach, the other coach was like, no, you can't do that. You've got to. There's a rule. He was like, no, there's no rules. I know the rules of basketball. There's no rule that says we have to play in shoes. And so they took off their shoes, played in their socks, and destroyed them.
So how did you come to this topic? Were you a basketball player?
No, I mean, I'm not a big sports guy, but I mean, I grew up in North Carolina, so you kind of like absorb it.
Was this lore in North Carolina? Does everybody know this story, or is this an untold story?
It's an untold story. There was a book written on it back in the 90s.
Well, it's. Go ahead.
But it's not common knowledge. Like at Central, they know it. That's their coach. Their gym's named after him. Out in Kansas, where McClendon went to school, it's very common knowledge, right? But within these local communities, it's common knowledge.
So McClendon was a black coach.
Yeah.
And he was the one that coached this team.
Yeah.
And he's the one that wanted to set up a game against the white players.
Mm-hmm. So he always had this
recognizing how dangerous that was. I mean, this was North Carolina in the 40s. This was not a.
Mm-mm.
It's not.
That's what we try to show in the documentary. when we did the reenactments, we had the kids, white and black kids. We actually had to explain to them, like, hey, no, there was once a time where you guys couldn't play basketball together, and it was such a ridiculous notion to them, today. But
Well, there's a line in the film where they said the black players had never touched a white man.
yeah,
White
it was
boy.
that. Yeah, people forget
Never
what
touched
segregation
them,
was.
let alone
Yeah.
play basketball. Hadn't
Yeah.
touched them.
hmm Yeah, separate church, separate bathroom, separate everything. I mean, it's really hard to drill that in, like living in the modern era, what that would have been like.
Do you have a clip that we can take? I
Yeah,
think we got a
we sure
couple
do.
of them.
We've
Why
got
don't
a
you run,
clip, I
why don't you
think,
run the
of
first
the-
clip so we get a sense of what this looks like?
They come into the court, and so they look at one another, the all-white Duke players, the all-black players from North Carolina College. They look at each other, and it's almost surreal at the time. Although McClendon says we'll have no spectators, he allows his 2 young children and his wife to be there. And I asked him once why he did that when he said it's going to be no one's there except the players and the coaches and the referees. And he said, because we're making history.
Well, that's certainly true. In the film, you say the players from Duke. Were these Duke varsity players, or were these Duke intramural players?
Yeah, so the team that they played, so this was during World War II, so everything's kind of crazy. You've got everybody going to war, and at Duke, they're training up doctors to go overseas to work for the Navy and the Air Force, et cetera. And so all the teams were kind of in flux. And the best team at Duke University was the Duke Medical School team, and they were just like John McClendon's team. They played a different style of game, but they dominated at that, and they beat everybody they played. They even beat Duke's varsity team, and so they.
So the med school team beat the Duke varsity team?
Yeah. Also, like an undefeated team, just like John McClendon's team,
Which was different
right
time.
across town.
Yeah.
Just like streets away. This is happening.
Now, did he have trouble recruiting the white players to play this game? I mean, it was dangerous for the black players, but it was equally dangerous for the white players.
Yeah, and that's another interesting
Maybe
part
not
of the story.
equally, but I mean, they suffered.
Exactly. And part of the interesting story there is that the Duke at the time was drawing in people from all over the country. So it's not just Southerners from North Carolina at Duke; it's people from all over. And there was one of the lead players of the Duke team was, I think, from Montana, something like that, and he was really pushing it. He was one of the first guys who heard about this team across town at Durham. And wanted to play them because these were just sportsmen, right? These are just guys who have beaten everybody they can beat, and they want to test themselves against the best. And so it's like sort of eating away at them this chance to play a team that everybody says will destroy them, right, on both sides. So, but he had to win over the more traditional.
Do we have a clip that shows the schematic of the kind of game they were playing before they had this interaction?
I think so. Did we lead? Is that the other clip on there that we had?
Yeah.
Let's take a look at that. I'd like to show everybody what that looks like, because I grew up in Indiana. In Indiana, you really have to learn to play basketball, which I did. And so the interesting thing for me, in part to the racial consideration, is just the style of play and the way that changed.
Basketball before McClendon, way before my time, but when I watch videos, there was a very systematic approach.
It was more of a stand-around game, and you're passing the ball, and there wasn't a whole lot of movement.
It was more of a half-court game, a lot of passes.
We're talking about a time in which there was no clock in basketball. There was no 24-second clock, and teams would just slow it down as much as possible.
And it was very boring.
Yeah. No, that was one of the interesting things about doing the documentary, is just to see how basketball was played. And like there was a period of time where they right about that, in that era, where they did they brought it back to center court after every field goal. So it would you would score. Okay, let's bring it back.
And you'd go back
we have
for
a
a jump ball. Yeah.
Yeah, a jump ball again.
Sure.
And so this was in that same era where John McClendon, the coach of the North Carolina College for Negroes team, was like, after that rule was changed, fast break basketball is going to be how we play basketball. And he was just one of the first people to just jump on that and strategize it. And he even wrote a book called Fast Break Basketball. Like the book on fast break basketball is written by John McClendon. Mm-hmm.
So this was a breakthrough not only in the racial field, but also the basketball.
Yeah.
Now, the Duke team, they were clobbering everybody. They were doubling the score, and they had a fast break game. But then when they played the team from the Negro College, it wasn't even close.
No, not even close. Well, at first, they were all, in the film we go through this, but they were just, the central team was not playing their game because they're playing against a white team. They don't know what to expect. They don't know, can we get aggressive
They thought
with
they had
them?
to play by white rules.
Yeah, right. We don't know. Nobody knew what to do. But John McClendon, he knew his guys were great, and he guided them through that game and just showed them, hey, these are just guys like you. They don't even know what's about to hit them when you play this style of play.
Didn't he call them over in the first quarter to say, stop it, play your own game?
Yeah. Yeah, just to remind them, like, hey, you just have to play basketball.
And then they won by 50 points.
Yeah. It was like they doubled the score, even though they were losing at like the first quarter, first half.
Now, as a filmmaker, what attracted you to this beside the story? Was it filming the basketball, or what made it an interesting film?
I think the main thing that got me interested in it is the untold story. Like whenever I hear a story and it seems like that should obviously be something everybody knows about, but nobody knows about it, it's like, well, I got to go tell people this, right? So I think it starts from there, and it also, it also is one of these, like, and I think it's little known because John McClendon himself, unlike modern sports guys, he was not a self-promoter. He was a very modest guy.
But didn't he end up in the Hall of Fame?
Yep. He did. They put him in I think 79 as a contributor, and it wasn't until 2016 that he was finally added as a coach, something like that.
But the thing about the Duke team, though, is that they didn't integrate until 1963.
Yeah, so this is
So
like
it's 20 years
decades
later that they broke the color line at Duke.
Yep.
Did this game factor in that, or what was the aftermath? What was the story after the game?
Well, my idea of it is that this really mainly affected. It was a big, first of all, it was a huge win for John McClendon because he was really convinced that the future of America, the future of sports, is going to depend on people being able to play anybody they want. Because how are you going to know if you're the best or the worst? And that was something, and just from a civil rights perspective, that was something he's always had like in his heart that he was fighting for. So I think for him it was a big win in terms of, hey, I can do this. I'm going to keep going with it. For the players, I believe it was also transformative. They really had an experience they otherwise wouldn't have had, and none of these players ended up playing professional ball. They all went back. They lived their lives, after World War II, after they went back back home. But they just intuited it and became, part of their part of themselves. And I think if you think about it, like as long as things like this are happening across the country, right? It's sort of building that kind of world that existed when the civil rights era actually came, right?
Well,
So
my uncle played professional ball for the Boston Celtics in 1950.
Oh, that's cool.
1949, and he was short, and he played a guard, and he had a set shot. Do you know what a set shot is? That's where you shoot it with two hands.
Okay.
And I took a look at that shot, and I thought I was pretty good, so I challenged him to a kind of a shoot-off in our court. He killed me. It was just ridiculous. His set shot was me. But here's the point of the story. There was no money in professional basketball in 1950, so he ended up going to med school.
Right.
So there was what we think of as basketball now is just totally different from what it was then. Thomas, as the incubator of this, what do you guys think about this subject?
Sure. So, Palladium Film Incubator, we support films like this by providing funding and also executive producing and working with filmmakers. So it was exciting to work on this project. I think for us, obviously it's a super compelling story because you've got these two teams that surrounded by all this racial tension. You've got these changes to basketball. But I think what's most compelling about it to me really is what it tells us about human nature. Because as you say, there's danger for both black kids and the white kids, but they just desperately wanted to know who was better at basketball. And that's what it kind of came down to. And it was all of these legal restrictions at the time and all of these, all the sort of rules that prevented them and forced them into this secret underground game that Greg had to kind of unearth because of only an only an oral history of it, to kind of find, the real story there. But it tells us something about individualism and, the American spirit. And then also, I'm kind of a basketball nerd, so I love learning about the fast break and thinking about how these two teams playing so differently would collide, and how it actually did shape the way basketball is played, to go from half court slow basketball like you just saw to what we see today with zipping around the court.
Yeah, I love that. I love that part of it. So, what did you learn when you made this?
Oh man, I mean, so much. I think I learned a lot about, obviously, I learned a lot about filmmaking, obviously, from the program that Palladium put together, the incubator program. So that was one of the most valuable things, was just becoming a better documentary filmmaker and learning how to interact with everybody that you need to pull together to pull off a great film. But also what Michael and Thomas at Palladium did for us was really stress the story. Like, that's where it all begins. And, the story is the most important thing. And if you've got a good story, then you've got somewhere to begin, and you can always fall back on that. And then everything else begins to you can build on the story, and it becomes, like icing on the cake, having a great score, having a great, having a great sound team.
So for other people applying at Palladium, how did Michael and Thomas help you with the film? What was the technical part? Story, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Story, obviously, and like how to go research. And then they also did a lot with us on the legal aspects of obtaining clips and making sure everything was could actually be shown, right? Because a lot of times you can get into a position where you think you can just, these days, especially with media so easily grabbable, you think you can just record something and then make it part of your movie, but that really sets you up for a catastrophe if all of a sudden somebody has the rights to that and then your film can't be seen by anybody. Yeah,
YouTube does that all the time.
Yeah.
We've got some music we bought and we thought was in public domain. We thought we paid for it, didn't we, Kenny? And we did. They still keep telling us we didn't pay for it.
Yeah,
that's our. So how do you approach this, Thomas, when you're working? How much time do you get to spend with each filmmaker on this?
Yeah, so we're fortunate that our program is a year-long program, and we have 4 filmmakers in it. So it's actually a very intensive program. We can be very focused on each filmmaker. So
you didn't start out with 5 and one didn't make the cut?
No, we started with 4.
Okay, all right, everybody got.
I think so we I call them all every week, and we look at their cuts with them. We do site visits and post production, and my father, Michael Pack, is a very established documentary producer director, and so
Brilliant.
He does some mentorship. But really, we're working with people like Greg, who are not. It's not like they're entry level. I mean, they're early career and can still benefit from some mentorship. But Greg already has a lot of filmmaking abilities, and so we're really sort of honing his craft and helping him improve to take that next big step forward. And as well as we provide funding for the film, and we help with the distribution side. So we're hoping it'll be a sort of a springboard for these careers. But all 4 films to us represent kind of like the future of like great conservative filmmaking. I think they're all really good, and really every one of them really worth watching.
Greg, what's your next project?
we were just talking about that. I got a few on my plate, but one of the ones that I wanted to do was a documentary on Lenny Bruce. Do you know Lenny Bruce?
Sure.
The comedian?
Sure.
Yeah, I like to look back on it because this is one of the things, like the left in the past used to be pro free speech, very on the cutting edge, and they would have had a whole different take on Lenny Bruce. And one of the ideas I had was like, what if we had a Lenny Bruce today? Would the left support him, or would they try to silence him? Would they let him really, really drill down into what's going on in society around him, or would he be silenced? Right?
Only if he wanted to be as funny as late night TV. In other words, no humor.
Right. It's pretty bad.
It is pretty bad.
But
now.
that's the thing. We need the other one of the other films in the incubator class. It's just we need comedy. We need to have the ability for people to poke away the world around them.
Well, thank you. This
No.
is great. I'll get this Dutch name pronounced De Deugd.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
Greg
what
De
we've
Deugd.
been going with.
Okay, we've been
Yeah.
working with that. Well, thanks for joining. And we're going to be able to watch this on Real Clear Politics tomorrow, which will be November 19th.
Yeah, you can watch it on Real Clear Politics /video, or you can just search The Secret Game of Fast Break to Freedom, and it should pop up. And if you're interested in learning more about the Palladium Incubator, you can go to palladiumpictures.com/incubator.
Perfect. So anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this. I did. I mean, it's not just the basketball, but the whole social part of the story. And for other things like this, I think we've maybe broken some new ground. Maybe we'll do some more stuff on filmmaking. Anyway, this has been the Bill Walton Show, and thanks for joining. And if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Tell your friends to subscribe. We're on all the major podcast platforms and Substack, and we're also on CPAC now on Monday nights. So anyway, thanks a lot, and I hope you enjoyed it. Talk to you soon.